We're here today with Bill Schneider, who is the managing editor of Etruscan Press, as well as the associate director of the Wilkes University Creative Writing Program. Um, the Wilkes program, of course, started back in 2005. Etruscan was founded in 2001 and has been housed at Wilkes since 2005, as a matter of fact. Etruscan is a small nonprofit literary press. We publish 6 books a year in poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, criticism, and translation. We've had 3 National Book Award finalists and a National Book Award longlist finalist. We've published writers from Cuba, Mexico, Switzerland, Greece, all over the United States, Ireland. So we have a kind of international profile. And our mission is to cultivate a dialogue between genres and between cultures. Bill Schneider has been our managing editor. He runs the press since 2014. And we're going to ask him a little bit today about what that entails. What does it mean to be the managing editor and to run a literary press, Bill?
It's an open-ended question. Running the press, I think for most people, and most authors actually that come to Etruscan don't realize what's involved in producing a book. So it's everything from managing the submissions and making sure that we've responded in a timely manner to those folks that have entrusted in Etruscan their work. It also means that we have a collaboration amongst the editors in discussing the works that we're interested in accepting. And then once we accept the title, it's about an 18 to 24 month process that we follow before the book is actually published. And again, I think to most writers, they don't understand why that should be such a lengthy process. And I say that the longer it takes is the care and the love that a press gives to a title. And what warms my heart is to hear author after author after author talk about their experience with Etruscan and how enveloping and embracing and collaborative it's been. And that's not an accident. That's by design. It's something that Etruscan really takes to heart. So we'll start with communicating with the author. We'll send them the contract, which is a standard industry contract. Once that's signed, we then look for their formatted manuscript, which is then ready to go to the copy editor. And once that process begins, we then send the author a very arduous task of answering our questionnaire. Our author questionnaire is about 12 pages long. The responses can make that lengthy. In fact, the record AQ response is held by Bruce Bond, and his AQ was over 30 pages long. And that's encompassing all of his awards, his previously published books, his list of folks that he wants us to reach out to via email once his book has been released. All of the information our distributor wants. It's a pretty cumbersome process. That's the first thing I inherited, was looking at our author questionnaire and making sure it was meeting the industry standards. So we assigned a couple of GAs that are Wilkes, they're now Wilkes alums, to compare and contrast our AQ with those of the big 5 publishers. So we sought to get those from those folks that have been published by the big 5. And we looked at what we are asking, what some of the other presses were asking, and then we really beefed ours up. So it's a really healthy process. And then we begin to develop a marketing plan that we then present to the author. And that by itself is what a lot of authors have said puts us on this higher level, because it's about an hour telephone conference call with the production editor and myself and the author. And we go through everything that we've asked, and we just confirm and have a dialogue. And at that point, we kind of strip away the underbelly and we ask that big question in a more organic way, which is, why did you write this book? And we really try to get a sense of where that author's head was at and what their purpose in creating this work is all about. And that helps us immensely. It helps us understand how we can market the book, what their strengths in pursuing this project are. And it also, I think, helps us and embraces the author even more closely with us. So that's, I think, what sets us apart in a big way. And from there, we begin the production process. So the book actually goes to the copy editor, who is, in most cases, a Wilkes alum. And they begin about a 3 to 4 week process of really getting their arms around the book. And they ask questions. If something doesn't make sense to them, or the syntax seems out of whack, they're confused about characters. It could be a number of things. And the copy editor's responses are then sent to our production editor, Pamela Turchin, who is also a Wilkes alum. And Pamela looks through those responses, and she determines anything that may not be appropriate for the author to see, or she can sometimes nix a suggestion right then and there. And then we send it to the author, and they have another 3 to 4 weeks to go through those comments and respond. And then once we've had this back and forth, which could take 3 or 4 months, we then have a manuscript that's ready to start the production process. And at that point, we send that to an interior designer. Having had the marketing call, we have cover ideas, which the editors confer and decide which is the approach we want to take. And we then reach out to a graphic designer, and many of those are affiliated with Wilkes, either as an alum or in some other capacity. And we then start another process, which is the art side of the book. So the interior, the cover, all of which have a commingling, and then the copy editor has also weighed in. This process goes back and forth with producing fonts, and once we look at usually 3 different font samples. Once we've decided which ones we like, we send those to the author and let them choose. In some cases, they may get all 3 fonts if we like them. And so there's a lot of collaboration, but also a lot of harmony. The back and forth of these page proofs can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And along that line, while that's all going on, we're also waiting for the author to come up with outside blurbers. And then that then leads us to that next process, which begins the promotion of the book. So we work very closely with Consortium, which is our distributor, and we work on sales handles, that is, ways we can promote this book to the sales reps that call on key accounts and major indie bookstores. What sets this title apart from all of the others, and that's why that marketing plan is so essential. And that culminates with basically a collaboration between Consortium and ourselves, that the authors already brought in their comments, and then we produce the advanced reader copies, or the formerly known as galleys, and we send those out electronically. We send an actual hard version where that's requested, and we also share that on a couple of platforms that are accessible to librarians and other indie bookstores that are not perhaps clients of Consortium. So we try to do this outreach as organically as possible. We also submit to Publishers Weekly. We work tirelessly with the authors list to get this book in as many hands as possible for potential review. So that process has to happen 6 months out. Now that's 6 months out from the release date, and the reason for that is that the key publications have that much of a lead time for their real estate, as it were. So once we've sent the ARCs out and the copy editor has one more chance, as does the author, to look at the book, we then have a proofreader give one final look. This is someone who's not been involved in the production cycle, so it's a fresh pair of eyes. And in many cases, the proofreader has been an intern. And we then finalize the production, and then it goes to print. So 18 months goes very quickly.
And of course, you're doing this in multiple books at the same time. So you're juggling
Yes.
three projects per season.
Correct.
And so it's not just waiting around for one thing. Your scheduling has to be precise and complicated.
Yes. In fact, we have a very succinct production schedule that the production editor and myself and our GAs and interns will discuss every single week. We just go through every title, where it is, what's going on, what we need to do to move the title along. And so we don't have 3 or 6 books in production. We really have 12. We have 3 that have already been published but are still in the promotion side. We've got 3 that are eminently going to be released. We've got 3 that are in production and 3 that are in pre-production.
Right. Of course, for all the press's efforts, as we know, poetry is a very difficult genre to sell, and in fact, most poetry presses are nonprofit presses because they need support from other sources besides sales, besides just revenue. Tell us a little bit about how the budgetary side, how this works in terms of creating revenue in an environment where the sales alone will not suffice.
That's a great question, because poetry is traditionally a non-seller, as any poet will tell you. But we're committed to sharing those voices and nurturing that dialogue. That's our mission. So we don't rely on book sales to help sustain us. If we did, I wouldn't be here, and our production here, and our copy. None of the production team. So it's a combination of finding folks that really are committed to what our mission is and are willing to do what they do. And I'm talking the production side, the designers, the copy editors. They're not in this for the money, they're in it for the love. So that's first and foremost. But we also rely on the generosity of donations, partnerships, affiliations, such as our affiliation with Wilkes since 2005, as Phil mentioned. And the other thing that we do is we do a tremendous outreach to communities that are traditionally underserved. And in some cases, we can get grant money to match that effort and to pay for the books that we then provide these folks that participate. So that's a huge revenue stream for us. Without that, we wouldn't exist.
Bill, you're also the associate director of the Wilkes program. Tell us a little bit about the kind of synergy or interaction between the press and the program.
Synergy is actually the exact, the perfect word to describe that relationship. So many of our authors have come to us through their awareness of the Wilkes program. They may teach at Wilkes, they may be on the advisory board, or they just have heard of us through seeing our name attached with Wilkes, whether it be at a conference such as AWP or even Hippocampus, or it could be the affiliation that we've developed over the years in outreach efforts. I think the awareness raised in the community when Etruscan authors come and read at any of the Wilkes, during the Wilkes residencies, that's huge. And then we've never rested on our laurels. So every time we have an opportunity for a partnership, we pursue that. And I think the most recent partnership was developed a couple of years ago. And it was when I learned of a group of folks, a group of airline employees at United Airlines in Boston that are avid readers. And their break room was being overrun by these books that they had read and nobody had repurposed. So rather than give them to the library and donate them, which was one idea, they decided to put up create a book rack, and then on these long haul flights from Boston to the West Coast, they would offer these as giveaways to their passengers. It's a really cool idea. So when I read about that, I thought, okay, this is Boston. Boston has 30-some colleges and universities. It's a pretty academic town. We need to get a head start. So we reached out to United and we said, how about if we partner with you guys? We'll give you books that have been returned as unsaleable by the bookstores that, could be a copy that was sitting on display, or it could be a book that somebody picked up and the spine maybe got a little torn and they can't sell it, but the book's still good. So we started this affiliation a couple years ago, and it's a tremendous partnership. We've actually created a bookmark with a QR code, and we've got Etruscan on one side and the program on the other, so we're cross-promoting Wilkes. And these books have gotten in the hands of hundreds of United passengers. And it doesn't stop there. When the plane that's going to the West Coast lands, the agents in Los Angeles and San Francisco have worked a cross partnership where they'll recycle the books that are turned back. So it's life after life after life with Etruscan books. So that's just, I think, one really good example of how our partnerships have given us life and also cross-promoted the program.
Certainly, one of the things that we do is we have a lot of our work done by graduate assistants and interns, both from Wilkes, but also we've had interns from Youngstown State University. We've had interns from Bucknell University, Nebraska, as I recall. We had one intern from. So, interns from other universities. Certainly, the majority are from Wilkes University. Tell us about the interns and what a potential intern might expect or work on.
Well, to say the sky's the limit is no exaggeration. I think Pamela and I will never disagree on this concept, and that is, without our GAs and without our interns, we wouldn't get a book out the door. And I say that with gratitude, but also the reality of this is that only two people doing the job of, lack of a better word, an army of colonels, it just couldn't happen. So our graduate assistants come to us with some, they bring something that is an asset to the press. Now, when Pamela started as a GA, and I love telling the story, her first day I assigned her a marketing plan. Now, Pamela had formerly been a teacher. She didn't have marketing experience, and she felt a little overwhelmed by this tall order, which I assured her was not going to be impossible to achieve. And now Pamela has outsourced and outlasted anyone in crafting the best marketing plan ever. We have a number of GAs that have design experience, and they've been able to then create our one sheets, which are an advanced promotion of the book. They help in designing and redesigning and repurposing our annual catalog, which is an online digital asset, but we also print a few copies to use for distribution at trade shows and for vanity purposes. We've had GAs and interns that have really helped us in the academic outreach, which academic is, for a press like ourselves, another source of revenue. So they've drafted study guides, which means they sit down and actually read the manuscript, and they come up with questions that a teacher would want to have to give to their students. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet for the academic community. These are students that really get the literary environment, and it's a great tool for them. And then they walk away with this tremendous asset on their CV or their resume that, I've drafted study guides. Now, time and time again, when we send the draft of the study guide to the author for their review, they are blown away. They're blown away because A, somebody read their book and somebody got their book. And then they're usually just doing cartwheels because these questions are so insightful and provocative, and that makes their day. So we share the study guide, we put it on our website, so it's very accessible, and we share that with our distributors' academic team. So they're also cross-promoting our titles to professors and educators. And it's a really cool thing when Phil and I get an email from an author saying, look what I just saw. And it's from their chair or their department head or their principal. And it's showcasing the study guide of their book, which they've gotten from consortium. So to me, that shows that, that the cycle works.
Bill, you've mentioned several times our distributor consortium. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Well, consortium just like their name implies, they are the arbiter of, I believe it's close to 400 independent presses. Now, not all of them are publishing books every single season, and a season's comprised of the fall and the winter is one season, and the spring and summer is the second. But what consortium does is they work with each publisher. Prior to the book's release, they have an actual conference call where we sit down with them on the phone and talk about our titles. And they have gone through all of the information that we're required to provide them, which is much of what's on the author questionnaire I talked about earlier. And they come up with suggestions of ways we might shift our marketing approach. They might suggest that we emphasize a little bit more about the author's previous titles, or they'll come up with comparative titles that they feel are more inclusive to what our author's work is about. And their whole approach is to help us sell more books. So it's a commercial love fest, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. But unlike a commercial for-profit press, we're fortunate because consortium realizes the constraints we have, and they do everything they can to help us sell as many books as possible. So if we can sell 10 more books because we've shifted a perspective on another comp title, that's a big deal for us, and they get that. They also have, following this pre-sales conference call, they then put together a catalog of all of their publishers' books. So we have a hand in what that is. The book cover, obviously, the copy that we submit, and then anything that's of value, such as if the author's doing any kind of a promotional tour or has had previous awards. And then lastly, they have a sales conference where we actually get to previously sit face-to-face with the sales reps. That's going to be a virtual experience for us in May. But nonetheless, we're actually able to talk to the sales reps. We're allotted 2 minutes per title. So for us, it's a 6-minute experience. It's something that Phil and Bob and I have we've enjoyed because we rehearse. We have all of our keynote quips ready to go. It's a little daunting because you get up to this platform with the sales manager of consortium, and there's this huge neon clock. It's like a timer, and it starts the time. It counts down, and when your 6 minutes are up, the microphone goes off. Am I wrong, Phil?
Oh, I know.
So it's just like a capstone experience. You know, you're allotted so many minutes and no more, and you don't want that bell to go off.
Right, right, right. Well, I think one of the things that I think about, Bill, when we think about Etruscan is the incredible enthusiasm, and I think about there's a wonderful distortion of scale. I mean, so much attention going into these books, which perhaps not many people will see. I mean, in other words, if you were a capitalist, if you were a person who was thinking commercially, you'd say, wait a minute, are we really apportioning our resources correctly? Because we're putting all this time into something that may seem, from the point of view of units sold, seem to have very little effect. But listening to you talk about this process, and also, of course, we know that our authors also are so deeply invested in the act of writing literary work, the belief that this has an impact far larger than can be represented in sales is, I think, in many ways embodied in the way that you approach your work. The fact that you, as I say, you treat this with the most the deepest reverence and the deepest attention to detail, which I don't know if everybody sees that, but those who do see it are deeply changed by it. And we appreciate what Pamela and you and all of our interns and graduate assistants and partners have done with Etruscan. So thank you very much, Bill. And
it's been an honor and a pleasure. And I say that with all sincerity and deep conviction. There isn't a day that goes by where I'm going to sound like a broken record, because all of the folks that I suspect have come to speak in your class, Phil, have said that they have the best job in the world. And I don't disagree. I mean, just be surrounded by books and to work with authors is a privilege, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you, Bill Schneider, Managing Editor of Etruscan Press and Associate Director of the Wilkes Creative Writing Program.
Thanks, Phil.